What is going on, geographers? It's Mr. Majewski here, and I am here to discuss the second major topic in the migration unit, push and pull factors. Now, it's important to remember, just like the last slide's presentation, you need to make a copy of your student version to your own drive because you're going to need to edit it, and you can only edit it if you make a copy to your own drive, and you're going to want to add information into the slides. I've only given you partial, incomplete slides, so you need to add in the details. You'll need that not only for the assignments this week, but also for the quizzes and tests this week and next as well. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, you should be plugging in anything that is missed in your version of the slides. All right, we're going to start with push factors. So, hey, anytime you decide to relocate, there's something that caused you to want to leave the place you were. There was something negative. There was some problem or issue that made you want something better in your mind. That's the push factor. It could be an event. It could be a circumstance. It could be a condition. It could be any negative thing. Now, we need to realize a lot of the time there might be multiple, but we need to try to hone in on what the most significant identified push factor was. So when we talk about push factors, we usually put them into one of 5 categories. And you need to be an expert at this. You need to be able to indicate which of the categories a push factor ought to belong under. Again, one final reminder on push factors. If the statement is describing a negative about the person's current condition, that's a push. All right? A pull is never going to be, hey, a negative thing. It's always going to be a positive reason why someone went there. Okay. So, our first category, social cultural. So there is something in society or something culturally in that country that is forcing or causing that person to want to leave. That could be religious persecution. Perhaps a person belongs to a religious group, or maybe an ethnic group, or some other cultural group in society where they feel like they're being persecuted or that their religious freedoms are not being respected. Perhaps it could be something where a language issue, right? Maybe they do not speak the majority language, or they're being persecuted because of the language that they speak. They may want to flee that as well. That's another cultural reason. Or perhaps there's something wrong society-wise. There's a societal weakness or lack of something that is really causing folks to want to relocate to someplace else that has it. Perhaps there's a lack of education or educational access. Or perhaps there's a lack of equality or empowerment for women and girls. All of those can be social or cultural reasons that would motivate a person to want to leave the country where they are. Secondly, demographic. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, demographic is the least commonly used, all right? But if the person cites overpopulation, there was a feeling that my country was overpopulated, there were too many young men, there were too many working class people, that's a demographic. That's a population reason why they were pushed out. They chose to leave because they felt that, all right? Or if they talk about, hey, you know, there's imbalanced sex ratio, there's more women than men, or there's more girls than boys. I couldn't find a partner, I couldn't find a spouse, and so I wanted a family, so I relocated somewhere where I had better chance. All of those are demographic push factors. Economic, a lack of jobs, right? Or not enough high-paying jobs. Or a low quality of life, right? Not enough resources available, right? Even something like a lack of food is an economic factor, right? Because it's an inability for that country to economically supply the food needed, all right? That's usually the most common push factor, economic, because most migrants voluntarily, when they migrate, migrate for economic reasons. Push factors can also be environmental. There may be an environmental disaster or problem that occurs, like a flood, like a tsunami or a earthquake, or maybe even more general environmental factors like, hey, drought, climate change, a lack of available farmland, or how about farmland that has been overused? All of these are environmental reasons why a person would be pushed out. And then finally, politically. Is there something that the government of the country is doing to that person that is causing them to want to leave? Were they jailed for their political views? Was their political party banned? Are they unable to vote? That's a pretty big political push factor, right? Are their basic rights not being respected by their own government? All of those could be reasons why a person would push. And we're going to get a lot of practice in this. You need to become an expert. All right, let's go to pull. So as you might imagine, pull is the opposite. Pull is what attracts you to a place. It's a positive. It's why you went there, right? A migrant has choices as to where they're going to go. The place they choose, there had to be some reason why they were there more than others. Again, usually the pull corresponds to the push for a person. So if a lack of jobs was the reason they left, they ended up where they did because they felt there were more jobs or better paying jobs. So again, pull factors can be social cultural. I was escaping religious persecution. Now I went to this place because they had religious freedom. They had greater access to education, or they had more equality for the sexes, right? Those would be reasons why you would want to go. Those would be pull. Demographically, a more balanced sex ratio, lower population. They needed people. They needed workers, right? All of those could be demographic. Better paying jobs, more jobs, right? Low unemployment. Any of those really fall into that economic category as well. More businesses, more shopping, right? More products available. Environmentally, how about access to clean water? What about better farmland? Or how about just access to national parks and open spaces? That would matter as well. And then finally, don't forget, right? You have political, better human rights, greater freedom, voting rights, more voting allowed, greater political tolerance for rival parties or views. All of that are political pull factors. Couple of things here. Sometimes there are barriers that prevent migrants from getting to where they would like to go. All right. Usually these are referred to as intervening obstacles. An obstacle is a blocker. It's a barrier. So a wall is an obstacle, but so is an ocean to some people. So obstacles can be economic. For instance, they don't have the money, all right, to be able to travel there. That's an economic obstacle. That's an intervening obstacle that is preventing them from getting where they would like to be. Cultural or social. Oh gosh, there's so many here, right? There are language barriers, religious barriers, right? That can prevent ethnic barriers that can prevent somebody from going to a particular place. Maybe they have they struggle with education requirements, all right, that are required to get into a particular country or place as well. So again, cultural or social obstacles, right? Politically, that can be a government's policies that restrict a person from entering. They can't get a visa to get into the country. There are walls, there are border patrol, there are agents, there are people all trying to prevent you from getting there. All right? Your own government won't allow you to leave. They prevent you from being able to leave. Those are political or even environmental, right? Oceans, deserts, mountains, all of these are environmental reasons or factors that can prevent someone from getting to their final spot. Now, I don't want you to confuse it with an intervening opportunity. All right, that's something slightly different. An intervening opportunity is when somebody chooses to not finish their journey because something better comes along. So, hey, economically, I find a better job before I get to the final spot I wanted to go to. All right, culturally, socially, I get married to someone along the way and I settle into that person, or I come across an area that has a lot of the people from my same ethnic group, so I want to stay there. Politically, how about, hey, I get the visa, alrighty, but I really like the country in which I stayed while I was waiting for the visa, so I choose to stay there. All right, and environmental intervening opportunities, well, that's really not really something that we normally see. Unless I guess you really, really loved living in the deserts or the ocean and you wanted to stay there permanently, for instance. Anyways, intervening opportunities are positives that prevent you from getting to your final spot. All right. Okay, we're going to describe the type of factor. You are going to complete this activity in your own slides. All right. So you're going to get a description of something And then you're going to type in, is it a push or a pull factor, and then which category? Is it an economic push? Is it a political pull? Is it a social cultural push? Is it an environmental pull? Is it a demographic push? All right. So there are a bunch of these, I believe 14 total. Just go ahead and type them in directly into your slide. And then once you've done that, come back to the to the Google Slides presentation and check your answers as I go through each of them in the video. You're going to want to pause the video now while you answer the questions. Okay, I'm back, and I'm assuming you have answered the questions here. You're going to get slides of real-life examples of push and pull factors, and I'm going to provide you the answers. So if you haven't already done so, pause it, go ahead and answer them on your own slides, and then come back and check and see how you do. Okay, example 1. U.S. factories in the Rust Belt in the U.S. had to deal with rising unemployment. And, okay, well, we've got rising unemployment, factories in that area. So that's an economic push factor, why people would want to leave, right? 2, factory workers in the U.S. Rust Belt states ended up going to Kentucky and Tennessee because new factories opened there instead. Well, that's an economic pull. It's as simple as that, right? Example 3. A severe drought caused thousands to lose their farms in Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Yes, that's an environmental push factor. And of course, that was known as the Dust Bowl. And number 4, well, this is environmental pull. All right. Farmers moved to California hoping to work in the 1930s, right? I think you could also probably call it an economic pull factor because of the way that it's termed. If you focused on farmers, you could call it economic. If you focused on work, you could call it economic. All right. Example 5. Chinese persecuted, arrested, and killed many Tibetans, including the Dalai Lama and his followers who opposed China's takeover of Tibet in 1950. So you're being persecuted by your own government, right? That's a political push factor. The Dalai Lama and his supporters fled to Tibet in 1959 to India, fled from Tibet to India, which allowed them to set up a government in exile. So now they've gotten political freedom from India to help them out. That's a political pull factor. Number 7. Anti-Mormon violence. Mormons are a religious group. In Illinois and Missouri, resulted in dozens of deaths, including that of the Mormon leader Joseph Smith in the mid-1840s. Well, religion is a cultural phenomenon, right? And they're being persecuted because of their religion by others, and so that's cultural push. And of course, they arrived in the Great Salt Lake, right? Therefore, that would be a cultural pull factor. Although based on the wording, if you went with environmental, I'd allow it because of agricultural opportunities. Number 9, the population of industrial countries in Europe in the 1800s increased and land became more scarce. That's a demographic push factor. And European migrants came to the U.S. in part because the Homestead Act gave people free plots of land for a filing fee and proof of land development, right? So you've got a lot of available land, right? Not enough people in that area. That's demographic. I think you could also, in that instance, say, land's available. You could probably say land could maybe be considered an economic push factor as well, all right? Especially when we're talking about farmers. Opponents of Fidel Castro were jailed or killed if they spoke out against his government after his takeover. That's a political push factor. You're going to want to get out of there or else you'll be jailed or killed. They received political asylum, so they received safety from the United States. That's a political pull. Finally, India, Pakistan. In India, violence between Hindus and Muslims during and after the partition of India resulted in more than 200,000 deaths from 1947 to 57. That's a cultural push. Right? Culture fighting between religions, right? Violence, deaths. Get you out of there. And more than 14 million people, mainly Muslims, migrated from India in hopes of finding safety in this new country, Pakistan. So that's cultural pull, looking for religious freedom and safety to avoid that persecution. All right, that's it, folks. We are good to go. You have a weekend assignment. I shouldn't say a weekend assignment. All right, folks, that's going to cut it, all right? And I will tell you, you do have a follow-up assignment now. I want you to try to talk with your family members and find out as much possible about the history of your family's migration patterns. For example, all right, folks, that's going to end it for us there. Now, you do have a discussion post assignment immediately after this, and I want you to talk with your family, and I want you to find out as much possible about the history of your family's migration pattern. I want you to see how far you can go up. I should say go back. For example, to end up in California, I can trace family members migrating from the late 1800s onward. And there you have it. From Poland to the United States, originally the state of New York. It was my great-grandparents on my dad's side. England to the U.S. on my mom's side. And then relocations to Michigan to Illinois, and eventually to California. I would like for you to try to do the same. And I would like for you to see how far you can go backwards and about what date your migration history can be recorded to. Now, some of your information may not be known, so I want you to talk to family members to find out as much as you can about your migration story. And I want you to be prepared to complete a discussion post about it, kind of listing your family's migration patterns as far back as you can go. Now, you also want to talk, if you can, about push and pull factors. So you're going to want to ask, if you are a migrant yourself, what were the push and pull factors that caused you to want to leave and come here? And if it was your parents or your grandparents, maybe you could ask them as well in order to improve the discussion response. Now, hey, not everybody's going to maybe have all this information, and that's fine. Share whatever you can. And this, you don't need to give details about the documentation of anybody coming across. I just would like to know the path with which you have arrived in the United States, and specifically in California and Anaheim. Now, one last thing. If you are describing being in another country you're listing out, you can just list the country's name. If you're talking about the various places in the United States that you may have lived, you just need to list the state. You don't need to indicate which cities you've lived in or anything like that. All right. Good luck with that, and I'm interested in seeing how far back some of you go and what your unique migration pattern story is. All right, folks. Mr. M signing off.